Relatively quick one for you here today, and even a glorified short, which this is brought to you by the show's title sponsor, 24/7 Services, who have managed to keep all their key quality people over the years. Now, the first thing for me is that Monchi stepped down. And there's a big difference between jumping and being pushed. And I think that characterization was confirmed by the fact that he's still working with V Sports in an advisory role, but also based on the comments made by Unai Emery during his pre-Bologna press briefing. The timing of all this sure made it appear as though he was somehow being made the fall guy, when in reality, his role was limited to basically being database resource like MLS Realty. All the big decisions fell squarely at the feet of Unai Emery. I don't even think Monchi was helping to evaluate or negotiate or draw up contracts, which is what he was doing for the majority of his career. But he was the third man in to this hierarchy. And this is where I think there is a lot of misconception by Villa fans. It is Unai Emery solely who determines the profile and criteria of each position of need. He presents that to his president of business operations, and then Monchi, using his global scouting networks, the analytics teams, even his own personal contacts, agents, etc., and provides that list from which Unai Emery has the final say. No different than when you're looking for a home. You punch in your criteria, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a garage, and it spits out a list that you choose from. In his previous roles with Sevilla and Roma, Monchi was in full control of football operations, from scouting, analytics, recruitment, selling, negotiation, and valuation, and at Sevilla he did so with absolutely incredible success. Roma, not so much. And where the philosophical divide may be is I feel like he was in favor of youthening the squad and taking a chance on higher potential talent, whereas Unai Emery seemed to prefer the dependable here-and-now type player. Well, here we are now with the oldest averaged age squad in the Premier League. I'm sure I'm not the only one who felt, looking at this squad, that it needed a full 24/7 Services, tear it down to the studs renovation, rather than a pretty redecoration. I mean, firstly, we would have probably alleviated a lot of our immediate FFP concerns, but we also would have moved on some players who were either at or hopefully not beyond their prime, and there is such a fine line between those two. Yes, it probably would have cost us European football next season, but in the long term, we might have been in better shape, and for whatever reason, we were unable to create a market for sales this past summer, and maybe the slow start is kind of a reflection of that. I would be shocked, though, if Monchi wasn't more actively involved in trying to relieve the club of all its deadweight contract or aging players, moving money out the door so that we could be compliant with all these FFP regulations. And if that's the case, which I believe it to be, we should be forever grateful. And I can't imagine how stressful that would have been, given PSR issues in 2024 and SCR issues this past summer. And then despite all those restrictions, there was still the expectation or the demands of trying to improve the squad, and that comes solely down to Unai Emery. In fact, it was reported that Emery actually wanted Lucas Paquetá over Harvey Elliott. Now, if that hadn't have fallen through, we'd be an even older squad right now, and that had nothing to do with Monchi. So when I see people posting lists with all the incoming and outgoing transfers with Monchi's face next to it, that is not an accurate depiction of how things worked over these last 2 years. It's just the nature of football that fans and media are always looking for a scapegoat. I saw a headline, "Monchi departs after poor start to the season." It's highly possible that this decision might have been made before the season even started. And with every decision landing on the desk of Unai Emery, who has the final say, you just can't make Monchi the fall guy. And by the way, I don't blame him for wanting a new chapter. He has more acumen than some of the people in the group. I think he actually might have been wasted at Villa, given his credentials. I see some people saying, well, why did we recruit Enzo Baranachea or Costa Nedeljkovic or even Andres Garcia when they're not playing? Well, it's not up to Monchi to decide whether they play or not. His job is to provide the best options from most expensive, hardest to get, down to the higher potential, cheaper, younger options, hoping for maybe a moonshot like Morgan Rogers prior to the start of this season. But even Rogers was entirely and solely an Emery discovery and recruitment. I'm not going to stand here and list off the CV of Roberto Olabe. You could do that yourself. But there are a lot of similarities between he and Monchi. They were fully in charge of the footballing operations at their respective clubs. For Olabe, it was Sociedad, where he tried to create the infrastructure to find high potential players, first in Basque region, but then everywhere else. And he was responsible for all of it. Scouting, procurement, negotiations, valuations, and I heard that he is an extremely savvy and tough negotiator. But within this structure, my fear is he's going to be limited to the same kind of role. Yes, providing the lists, but not having a final say on recruitment or recruitment valuation even. And this is where I get a little bit concerned about the autonomy of Unai Emery. Who is challenging the manager? And I believe our owners are so concerned about losing him that they've basically handed him the keys to the castle. I've even heard through Premier League back channels that Emery is actually the highest paid manager in the league based on non-reported incentives. And you know what? Up until this point, he has been worth every single penny. There's a reason Aston Villa is projected to breach UEFA's SCR regulations again, costing the club and our owners more money. And I'm sorry to tell you, that does not come down entirely to Monchi. If you want to make him the fall guy and that helps you sleep better at night, that's fine. But that is not how it was explained to me. And trust me, I was both shocked and slightly depressed finding out that this group, which I had characterized as intelligent, strategic, lean, and efficient, was not necessarily so. The idea that Unai Emery would leave Villa for Manchester United is absolutely preposterous to me, given that he would never have the same kind of autonomy there as he does here, because United treats their managers like cattle in and out, and they have their own recruitment individual reporting to the owners rather than to the manager. Sir Alex Ferguson was the last person to have that kind of control over both recruitment and then the technical leadership of the club. If the owners were to say to the manager tomorrow, Unai, we're bringing in our own person to deal with all recruitment, all staff and player contracts, he would be gone that day. And I see the benefits of having one person's brain devising the vision and the philosophy up here, and then the implementation and the structure down below. I see the benefits of that, but sometimes you've got to have checks and balances. You need experienced people who can say, we're paying too much for that player, we're not selling this one for enough, and this player needs to be moved on because he's past his best buy date. Roberto Olabe's quick appointment confirms that this was probably in the works for quite some time, maybe even before transfer deadline day when the Monchi leaving rumors began. And it's no surprise that Unai Emery has a pre-existing relationship with Olabe because he is not going to work with a stranger. The question is, will Emery allow Roberto Olabe to be Roberto Olabe? Otherwise, a year from now, we'll still have the oldest squad in the Premier League and we'll still be facing FFP regulations. On the positive side, the fact that Olabe is willing to step into this situation with all the short-term challenges right now and an aging squad, that to me is actually a good sign. The guy is not faint of heart. Unai Emery is not a control freak. He is just so crystal clear with his vision, ideas, and how he sees the identity of this football club. He just doesn't want anyone or anything to interfere with that. And I really liked what I heard post-Sunderland, pre-Bologna from both him and Ezri Konsa. Because Unai Emery's not a father figure type manager that can be taken advantage of like Dean Smith or the ego-driven robot like Steven Gerrard. To get to where you are in his career, you have to have some understanding of human behavior and the tact to deal with it, even in difficult situations. 2 wins would be really helpful this week though, wouldn't they? And until Bologna, thanks for watching.